The city of Tokyo is a living, breathing creature. As a cultural hotspot and place of pilgrimage for art, fashion, media, and music enthusiasts alike, walking through the streets can feel like integrating yourself into some great organism which is constantly moving, creating, sprawling ever outwards. With a population of 13.9 million, Tokyo is Japan's most highly populated prefecture, and, with a name which literally translates to the Eastern Capital, there is no denying the magnitude of the social, economic, political, and cultural influence that radiates out of this city. So one must ask, in a place where people flock from all around the country and around the world to innovate, connect, and push for social change, where, spatially, does this change occur? We established in our previous episodes that Eastern queerness does not mirror Western queerness, that the visual cues many Westerners look for in our queer peers are not universal. We have also established that a gendered and sexual conservatism has persisted throughout Japanese culture since its implementation by the state 2 centuries ago. Applying this to our investigation into the queer fabrics that are interwoven into the tapestry of contemporary Eastern cultures, we must now ask ourselves, where do you go to find the LGBTQ+ activists of Tokyo? Welcome to episode 6 of Slash Queer. You're here with me, your host, Georgie Williams. Fortune favors the opportunistic gay, or, that is what I would like to believe, led me to conducting the interviews included in our following episode. If you were to cast your mind back to episode 4, you will remember our interview with Professor Yuka Kano at Doshisha University in Kyoto. Professor Kano and I got chatting after we recorded her interview, and she informed me of a friend of hers, a young man working in Tokyo, whose work aligned with what I was planning on searching for in the city. I was looking to find individuals who were transforming physical spaces into places which could facilitate queer education, understanding, and foster a sense of community, and, after reaching out to this man, I boarded a bullet train to go and meet him in Tokyo. Sho Akita is an independent curator who organizes queer screenings on a platform called Normal Screen. Sho started this project in 2015 and collaborates with local cinemas, organizations, and universities. When I informed him that I was looking to connect with LGBTQ+ activists in Tokyo, he was hesitant to call himself one, but after he told me about the work he was doing, it seemed like a fitting descriptor.
5 years ago, so I have background in film and video arts, and I've been studying and listening long time. And I realized I was only studying these work and I was not practicing. Also, I thought in Tokyo 2015, there are not many queer things happening, things happening individually or spread around Tokyo, but not connecting and people don't know each other. That's what I felt. Personal point of view. And also there are queer films distributed sometimes and a film festival happening here too. But I thought I wanted something that I can talk about with people about queer arts and cinema all year long, constantly, maybe on social media, but also wanted to have the space that people can hang and see one same visual image, representation or reflection of queer people, both about Japan and globally. The other thing I'm really interested in is the networking of queer people globally. I like the sense of the connection. So I try to screen video and films all around the world.
How do you feel about the queer scene in Tokyo? Is there anything that you think needs to change?
I don't think anything needs to change. We just need more queer related events and especially something to do with culture and arts, because I think since around 2015, there are many things happening related to LGBTQ issues, politically, like same-sex marriage and anti-hate crime law, which is not, we don't have it, but like people talking about it. And people create events to talk about these issues, which are amazing. And many interesting queer films are distributed, like Moonlight and like big LGBTQ cinemas. But I want more parties and I want more queer events for queer people. Because those LGBTQ issues related events are like, these are very important, but they organize it to communicate with straight society, right? And then like we explain a lot to majority for society. And I think these are very important, but we also need more things for queer people in Japan in general, yeah.
So my final question is, what challenges do you think that the LGBTQ plus community faces in Japan? Are there any issues that you think an individual from outside of Japan may not be aware of?
This question is difficult. It's difficult because I feel like there are too many. I don't know where to begin. The gender gap of Japan is among like more than 150 countries. It's always like 110, 120 something. It's like really bad. So that means like women don't, how do you call it? Like women don't have the equal rights to men. Like
in terms of pay and access to jobs and okay.
And they don't consider about sexuality, I guess. It's about gender. It says like in 2019, Japan is in the rank 121 among 153 countries around the world. And then like people are like, yeah, it is. Like it's not like that's crazy. Like that's how we feel, right? That's like queer people and women feel. I feel like it's long way to go for queer people because. But maybe you notice it's interesting. It's not like New York City. Even if you dress whatever you want, people are not on the street. When you walk, people are not gonna come at you and punch your face. That's very, very rare in Japan. But I guess like microaggression is like everywhere and every day. So that's microaggression. Like you don't notice because it's like every day of your life and you're growing up in that environment in Japan. So I feel like many people agree. I feel like most of the queer people here are feeling huge stress. But I think the tricky part is like many people can't tell because it's like you're growing up in that muddy environment of homophobia. Yeah. Regarding to what queer people can do in other countries for Japan, I don't know. But I think it's connected to what I do, but it's very empowering to see queer people striving everywhere in any country, like in Southeast Asia, or like in New York, wherever. And today we can see that, in social media, like live. So I think it's great. I think we can empower or inspire each other globally. And while we do it, I think we should not forget, like, we're not there yet. Or like Taiwan, people think it's like very liberal. Now they can get married and blah, blah, blah. But I know there are queer people who still cannot tell their friends or family that they are gay or their sexuality. So I don't want to forget those people too. But I think people who have what they want tend to forget about it, right? So I think that's what we should not forget.
「
I attended one of Show's screenings at a newly opened queer vegan cafe in Taito City, a neighborhood in the north of Tokyo. This was the first I'd heard of any business or venue advertising itself under the term queer, and, according to some of the staff that I chatted to, this was unusual in Tokyo. There was a mix of attendees at the event. A few Europeans such as myself, predominantly locals and individuals aged anywhere from their early 20s right up to middle age. The screening was a set of short films about the impact of the AIDS crisis on American queer culture, produced via the Visual AIDS organization. The videos themselves were moving and insightful, but following their screening, what I found was that the event was predominantly allowing queer individuals to network and share in their experiences. Sho had been adamant that he did not refer to himself as an activist, but the event he was hosting was facilitating those connections occurring, allowing for like-minded people to collaborate and organize. Japanese queer citizens have a lot to discuss when it comes to the matter of their human rights. Although Japan is often lauded as the most progressive of East Asian countries for LGBTQ+ rights, this is a country where same-sex marriage is still illegal, as is adoption for same-sex couples, and lesbian couples are denied access to IVF treatment or artificial insemination. Sexual orientation and gender identity are not protected characteristics under national civil rights laws, which means that many LGBTQ+ Japanese citizens face discrimination in areas such as housing, healthcare, employment, and education. Fortunately, residents living in the Tokyo metropolitan area are now protected under laws implemented in April 2019, but outing yourself in Japan can still have severe, life-altering consequences. Spaces like the Ryusen 112 Cafe, events like Show's screenings, provide a safe environment for those disadvantaged by archaic and demoralizing legislation. It was at this screening that Sho helped me make my next connection. Working at the cafe was Maiko Asami. Asami is one of the founding members of WAIFU, a feminist collective dedicated to, in their words, creating a space which appears on a regular basis, where anyone of any gender expression, sexuality, race, body type, or physical ability can enjoy themselves without fear or harassment. One of the catalysts for the establishment of WAIFU was founding member Ellen McCready being turned away from a lesbian party in Tokyo because she was a trans woman. Founding members of WAIFU have since been interviewed by Time Out Tokyo about their project, and with Asami's assistance, I was able to arrange my own interview with them and two of their fellow founding members, Ellen McCready and Midori Morita. The four of us squeezed into a busy cafe in Shibuya one afternoon and let me pick their brains over why these kinds of spaces were so necessary in Tokyo's nightlife scene. I must add, before we proceed, that as there are 4 people talking in this recording, 2 of whom are speaking Japanese, you may wish to refer to the transcript available for this episode at /queer.com if you do find this confusing.
My first question is, do you feel like there is an issue with a lack of inclusivity in LGBT spaces in Tokyo? If so, what do you feel may be causing this issue?
新宿2丁目に対してであれば、やっぱり夜のお酒の場でナンパが中止になることが、なんかゲイ男性はもうゲイ男性だけで集まるとか、そういう、文化を作ってるのかなとは思います。
She said, as far as Shinjuku Nichome, which is the main, traditional gay neighborhood, really not queer neighborhood in the city, it's a nightlife area and it's more aimed at hooking up, right? So it's like the spaces are very segregated by who is interested in who, and there's not much overlap between those spaces.
なんかゲイ男性の中でもそんな熊系が好きな人も熊系のバーだけとかもなんかもうそういう感じで。
So it's and even within like cis gay men spaces, it's quite subdivided. Like okay, so a space for bears, a space for this, a space for that, and then like really not much overlap between even those spaces.
なんかもしかしたらそれは多くの人があまり実生活でカミングアウトできてないからなんかそういうナンパだけその2丁目になんか切り離されてなんかそこでそういう風になってるのかもしれないけど。
So it might have to do with the difficulty, at least historically, but still now, of coming out in more generally in your life in this country, and so like. The spaces that exist are really just for very temporary kinds of relationships. So trying to go out in Nichome as a trans woman is like disastrous because there's no place to go. Like you don't want to be in the spaces for cis gay men. The spaces for cis gay women don't want you there in general. Not universally, but often. And so like where are you supposed to go? So for myself, I almost never go out in Nichome and I just go clubbing in what amount to straight spaces, which has its own set of uncomfortablenesses, but less so maybe than the kind of direct attacks you sometimes get in these other spaces.
Okay, that sounds exhausting.
Yeah, it's pretty exhausting.
What is the mission of WAIFU at this time? What do you hope to be the outcome of this project, both for yourselves and for your local community?
The immediate goal of the party is to just create a space where anybody can come and know that they'll be free of harassment and that they can be comfortable and have a good time without like getting in trouble for who they are. So the space is centered around queer femmes and trans women, but it's open to anybody. But we state very clearly at the door we have a card which we ask people to look at and read and verbally agree to, which says no transphobia, no harassment, blah 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 blah, and people are let in on that basis. And then if we get a complaint, we just throw them out. So anybody can come in, but if they make people uncomfortable, they will be asked to leave. That's the strategy we've chosen for that. And then for that's the short term or immediate part. Do you guys go? WAIFU 自体での目的、長い意味じゃなくて、それ以上あります？
そうだね。あとやっぱり。クラブ文化の廃れっていうのは日本すごい問題あると思ってて、それに関してもやっぱり、最近日本の若い子全然クラブ行かないからそういう、若い世代の子に向けてもすごい発信してそのクラブっていうのは昔の人が思ってるそういうクラブの中で痴漢されても仕方ないみたいなそういうんじゃなくてクラブっていうのは人といろんな面白い人と出会っていろんな文化の発祥の場であるっていうことを示していきたい。
So there's an issue in the whole club scene in Japan at the moment, which is that it's the same as the whole society. It's aging. And the youngest people don't really want to come out to the club. So one thing we want to do with our party is show people that it's not like the old days of clubbing where you show up in the party and like somebody touches you and oh well, that's life. You know, if you don't want that, don't come out. So what the goal is to show people that a club space can be a space where you meet all kinds of interesting people, encounter all kinds of interesting culture, have interesting conversations, have a good time, and don't have to put up with a bunch of shit.
That sounds fantastic. I wish you guys were like everywhere.
なんかやっぱり今はやっぱ青山八を会場として開催していてすごい 4階まで階段ですごくいいクラブなんだけど、それでちょっとアクセスしづらい人がいたりとかするので、今後自分たちだけでは難しいかもしれないけど他のパーティーとコラボレーションとかしてもう少しアクセシブルだったり分煙をやりやすいような会場で開催できる機会が増えていったら、去年幸い2回できたから今年はもうちょっとできるといいなと。
As far as the future of the party, one of the issues that we got at the moment is it's a general problem with the whole, small, it's called small box culture of Tokyo clubs. So these small spaces, which tend to be accessible only by stairs. So there's no elevators. It's quite hard for people with certain kinds of physical conditions to access these spaces. And we've been talking about this a lot within the organizer group. But to move to a larger space requires a scale and a level of funding that we haven't got at the moment. And so last year we did 2 collaborations, one with MUTEC, which is a digital art and music festival, and the other one with this lesbian party called Goddess. And both of those were inaccessible spaces. So we're hoping that this year we can do more of these things and ultimately, maybe even in a non-collaborative environment, start holding parties in bigger spaces. So we're looking to grow. Okay, that's the thing.
もう一つなんだろう、トランスフォビア、ノーホモフォビアだけじゃなくてノーレイシズムも一応入ってるから、いろんな人が運営に参加してくれるともうちょっといろんなアイデアが入るからいいかな。
Our organizers group is Japanese and also non-Japanese women, okay, but no POC at the moment, and so that's a thing, and it's so in the party itself tends to be quite low on POC. Of course, it's a general problem with the demographics of the club scene here. It's not really in our control, but it would be much nicer if the space was more diverse in that sense as well. And so we're hoping that that's something that will change in the future too. Okay, and then for me, if I can add to that, so one effect that WAIFU has already had, we've only been going for 6 or 7 months. 6 or 7 months, is that about right?
5月から
We started in May, the beginning of May. I can't do the math. 8 months. But
It's been great.
Okay. The policy that we've got, it's been showing up around the city in other parties too. So people have been posting these kind of policies elsewhere as well. And it would be so great if that kind of policy started spreading to bigger clubs, bigger parties, and maybe just the space in general. And if not, if we could develop a network of parties, a network of spaces that was a genuine alternative. I mean, ours is WAIFU is an alternative already to Nichome and these more traditional. So WAIFU is already an alternative to Nichome and these more segregated spaces, shall we say? But we're doing them every 6 weeks, every 2 months, and it would be great if a network of other parties and spaces developed that was a weekly, all the time, where one can go out in a more general kind of queer space. Yeah.
そうだからミューテックとゴーデスとのコラボは2つの大きな意味があった。ミューテックはすごい、クラブシーン全体にそういうアンチハラスメントポリシーをシェアする機会になったし、ゴーデスは2丁目系の大きなパーティーと一緒にできたから、その2丁目系の人たちにもそれをシェアする機会になる。
So the collaborative things we did last year, the one with MUTEC was, MUTEC is a big deal in the general club scene. And so for us to be able to present this kind of policy in this kind of space was quite important, we think. And then for the collab with Goddess, which is like a classic big Nichome party, to do something with them was also this very nice bridge building kind of situation. So hopefully this continues.
And one more.
Okay, go.
全然 多分5月とか4月の時にはこう想像できてなかったけど、なんかWAIFUがきっかけでそのサファイアスローズターのトークとか、なんかそういうトークの依頼の機会もすごい、トークのオファー、トークのオファーがなんか来る機会がすごい増えた。エリもそうだと思うし、だからなんかそういうトークを通してもなんかそういうアンチハラスメントポリシーみたいなものをなんかいろんな人とシェアできる機会が増えればいい。
そういう意味では今日のこのインタビューっていうのはすごい意味あることやと私らは思ってます。はい。
Okay, so Michael said, so one thing that we didn't expect at all from starting this party is the sort of broader impact it's had. So Sapphire Slows, who regularly DJs for us and does activism in the broader scene, has gotten a lot of talk invitations to speak about our policy and speak about inclusivity in these spaces. So have I. So we gave a joint talk last year at Sound Gender Activism, Feminism, or something like this. It's a collective that's based in London. So they did a thing here, and we gave a joint talk there about on these topics. She's had a couple talks, and it's been really nice to be able to spread this kind of discussion even outside of just queer spaces.
What can activists and allies based outside of Japan do to support Japanese queer communities?
やっぱり私らは知ってもらうってこと、知ってもらうっていうことを広めて、日本でこういう活動してますよっていうことを日本国内だけじゃなくて外からも知ってもらうっていうことが一番大事だと思ってるんで、私たちのやってる活動をシェアしてほしい。
So first of all, it's so important for people to know what we're doing. Let me just modify what you said a little bit. So this is not just a Tokyo thing. Obviously, this is part of a broader movement in a broader community, and it's important for us to be known to this community and for people outside, like who are not in the local community, to know that they have a space they can be welcome when they come here. So the more people who know about what we're doing, the better in a sense. We would love to build bridges with everyone, so please keep an eye open.
Share.
And share our info and stuff like this. That would be great. I mean, it's a lot of people come through Japan, but don't know what's going on.
Right.
And so we're here, and we are, and be in touch, you know? Yeah. Oh, and also, another thing, to all the DJs touring through, be in touch. We come play. Yeah. We would so love to set something up for you, so come. Yeah, just text.
そうだね。世界
なんか DJ とかミュージシャンとかもそうだし、なんか他の国で同じようなポリシー掲げてやってるイベントとかとなんかいろいろそのこういうことやったらこういうことが起きたとか、なんかそういうストーリーもシェアしてなんかよりいい運営の仕方をなんか学んでいきたい。
And we would also love to hear from people with not just within music and art, but people who are activists more generally, and like what people have done that's been effective, and because we're trying to improve our practice. So anything that you could share with us would be so appreciated.
そうだよね。私たち4人の今5人かな、5人6人になりつつあるけど、そのメンバーのみんな共通っていうかいいとこは誰でもウェルカム本当に誰でもウェルカムなんでもし海外からも私こういうことやってますコラボしたいですとか私こういうアートやってますこういう DJ やってますコラボしたいですもしくはあなたのイベントに出たいですっていう人はもう本当にウェルカムだから日本に来たら日本に来る前に連絡ください。
そうなんかいろいろワークショップもやってるから、なんか別に DJ とかだけじゃなくてもなんか何でも。
Right now there's 5 people on the organizers team, moving towards 6 slowly, and we all do different things. In the group there are artists, there are music people, there are activists, there are academics like me, and so we're all doing different kinds of stuff, and we would love to hear from you if you're coming through. And if you want to play, if you want to do some art thing, if you want to set up a talk, we do workshops as well, and we would love to help you and do things together. So we're looking for collaborators. So be in touch before you come.
At the end of our chat, I asked Asami, Ellen, and Midori if they had anything further they wished to share, and as it turns out, Ellen and Midori are in the midst of their own legal and political battle, which cuts right to the core of one of the biggest struggles still faced by queer citizens in Japan, the continued illegality of gay marriage.
So 2 of the organizers, me, Ellen, and Midori, are married. We've been married for 20 years. So actually, the party we have at the end of the month is our literal 20th wedding anniversary. So, yeah, but our marriage is in a complicated place because I transitioned. And so Japan doesn't have same-sex marriage. And the result of that is that if Japan fully recognizes my transition, then the government has no choice but on paper but to de facto accept a same-sex marriage or to dissolve our marriage, which it's not clear that that's even legal. And so what they've decided to do is to update one part of my paperwork in accordance with my U.S. passport to female, and not update the other part, which was existing from before, which is the place where our marriage is registered. So I am officially, legally, bureaucratically multi-gendered, which is sort of fucked up, to be honest. And it's not. Well, A, it doesn't make sense. B, it's bizarre, and C, it's not even clear what our marriage status is. So we are in the process of crowdfunding a lawsuit to sue the government to clarify the situation, and in the best case, obviously clarify our personal situation, but also give the government no option but to recognize same-sex marriage. And so hopefully this could be the case that forces the government to make this a possibility for a lot of people. So that crowdfund is live, and if you feel like supporting, that would be wonderful.
それでその中で、裁判とともにこのWAIFUの活動でもそういうことをすごいやっていくから、もしドネイトしてくれたらこれほどのお金はWAIFUの活動のためにも使われるから。
So we're doing action on this front, not just on the legal front, but also within the party and within these events. So if you chose to donate to the crowdfund, then that would also be supporting our activities as WAIFU. For example, this move to more accessible spaces that we were just talking about.
You can find the link to Ellen and Midori's fundraiser at /queer.com/fundraising. If you can give, please do. These 2 women have taken on an unfathomable task in the name of pushing LGBTQ+ rights forward in Japan, and even the smallest donation will help towards making that change happen. It has been argued before, oft by individuals absolved from any substantial political engagement, that the establishment of queer-focused or queer-exclusive spaces is an act of self-segregation which is a disservice to the LGBTQ+ community, that our desire to organize as a collective in one place is a separatist practice. It was Gavin Brown in his paper, Mutinous Eruptions, Autonomous Spaces of Radical Queer Activism, who wrote of the autonomous queer spaces he ethnographically researched emerging in London during the early 2000s. Brown observed that individuals in these spaces celebrate gender and sexual fluidity and playfully subvert normative binaries. Participants in these spaces actively create them in order, temporarily, to revel in their otherness, difference, and distance from mainstream society. By unsettling fixed identities in this way, the activists claim an autonomous space in which to be on their own terms. The activist element of the work of WAIFU or Show Akita comes in creating these spaces, temporary but invaluable nonetheless, where one was not required to limit themselves based on cisnormative and heteronormative expectations of social behavior. Activism is so often misconstrued as an aggressive battle, a loud and unambiguous pushback against a regime or ideology. But there is a quiet power in ensuring that a place for queer individuals to just be, without judgment or labor, is available. It is not an act of segregation to provide a community something which those outside of it have the fortune to take for granted every day. It's equity. One late evening, I found myself standing at the intersection of two bustling streets in Shinjuku, unable to read the street signs and unsure of how to get to my destination. And I realized that I was likely going to have to make myself uncomfortable by asking a stranger for directions. In this moment of anxiety, a parallel presented itself to me, between my feelings of confusion and misdirection as I stood alone in a Tokyo street, and the means through which I had to access the queer circles I had discovered during my time in this city. Word of mouth had been all that I could rely on. From Professor Kano in Kyoto introducing me to Show Akita, to Sho introducing me to Asami from WAIFU, and later to Ken Nakahashi at his gallery. It was Ken who then introduced me to Eikimori's art, which I mentioned in episode 4 of the podcast. By and large, it felt like you had to know who to ask. I wondered how much I would have been able to find out about these communities if I had grown up here myself, a queer individual in a city where queerness is not as visibly communicated. I wondered what it must take for an individual like Sho, or any of the members of WAIFU, to practice making their work accessible and easy for an outsider to discover and involve themselves with. I thought about what Sho had to say, about how easy it is to forget how fortunate we are to have what we have when we've obtained it. It is one thing to establish a queer project or rally around a cause when people are present, visible, and requesting it. You face an entirely different kind of struggle when you are trying to bring an issue to light which has for so long been kept behind closed doors. When Sho talks about microaggressions, he is talking about those small discomforts, those seemingly minor acts of hostility or discouragement that build up over time until the straw breaks the camel's back. When Sho or WAIFU put on an event, it is a pushback against that tide of aggressions and slights against us that seeks to wash queerness from the mainstream consciousness. It generates a space, both physical and social, where people are safe enough to let what makes them different be seen. Every time this happens, that person becomes a signpost, demonstrating to other queer individuals that there is somewhere they can go, where they too can be themselves. Sho and WAIFU are not just providing places to be, but showing people where to go, to find refuge, solidarity, and community. Spaces are made by those who inhabit them. They are generated in the image of those present, and, in the congregation of those who attend these events, queer spaces manifest. They are not bound by walls or doors, and they can spring up anywhere, growing in spite of all that has been done to limit and prevent their existence. Tokyo's LGBTQ activist scene is growing every day, setting roots down in cafes, nightclubs, and art galleries, and spreading out into the city. It is emblematic of what gives Tokyo its charm, and spurs that sense of intrigue, that you will find what you are looking for in this city. If, that is, you know where to look. This episode of the /Queer podcast was edited by Sam Clay and scripted and produced by me, Georgie Williams. A very special thanks to our guests Sho Akita of Normal Screen and Mike Garsami, Midori Morita and Ellen McCready of WAIFU. I'd like to also ask our listeners to share or consider contributing to Ellen and Midori's crowdfunding project, where they are suing the Japanese government to recognize their marriage. As previously mentioned, you can find a link to their GoFundMe page at /queer.com/fundraising. You can find WAIFU's page by clicking their link on /queer.com/resources. Cases like Ellen and Midori's can be the tipping point in matters of social justice and legislative change, so please give them your support. It is a very worthy cause. As we take this podcast from Japan to Indonesia, I want to take a quick moment to thank all of you who have supported this project, particularly my Patreon subscribers. So big thanks to Christine, Amy, Lindsay, Bronya, Natalia, Jackie, Padu, Sam and Christopher. Your pledges have now covered one of my flights across Indonesia to conduct interviews, so you are directly responsible for some of our upcoming content, which is pretty cool. If you fancy joining my gang of delightful patrons, you can find the /Queer Patreon at patreon.com//queer. That's SLASH queer. The link is also available on our Facebook, Instagram and Twitter pages. Your pledges help ensure that these stories are shared with listeners all around the world, from students to educators, activists to healthcare workers. And it's through ensuring that these stories are heard that we can celebrate in and utilize the power of our histories as a community. Stories unify us, and as we continue with this project, I hope to be able to source more kinds of stories that can bring us together in the face of adversity. This episode was recorded on location in Tokyo in Japan. Music in this episode was composed by Kevin MacLeod. If you enjoyed this episode or have any feedback, please get in touch on Instagram or Twitter at @/queer or email us at /queer@outlook.com. Once again, until next time, stay kind, stay radical, and stay queer.